Hi everyone, I'm Guy from AC3 here in Melbourne, and I'm working there as a cloud solutions architect, and I'm enjoying reInvent. I hope you are too. I just wanted to catch you up on some of the new announcements that have come through so far. I'll talk to you about some S3 changes that have come through, announcements. So first one I'll talk about is multi-bucket replication. So previously, if you wanted to replicate your bucket to multiple other buckets for durability purposes or backup, or because you had workloads in multiple regions, you would need to actually set that up yourself. You could replicate to a single other bucket, either in the same region or in a different region, but you couldn't replicate to multiple buckets. So now you can, which is great. The second thing I'll talk about is bidirectional sync. Now, this announcement sounds a lot more exciting than it possibly is. The implication being that you can sync from bucket A to bucket B and have changes made in bucket B automatically synced back to bucket A. That's not what's happening, other than in a very limited way. So what can now be replicated bidirectionally is metadata. So data about your data, essentially, not the objects themselves, but so for instance, if you were to change a access control list on an object in bucket B, that change could be replicated back to bucket A. So, you know, I'm not sure what the use case for that is. There must be one. Perhaps you can tell me in the comments below. But anyway, it's a new capability. Quite interesting, possibly more significant capability is the ability to have read after write consistency now. So previously S3 had strong read consistency on writes to objects. So if you wrote an object initially, that put would give you a strong read directly afterwards. But if you were to update or delete that object would not be necessarily readable. That change would necessarily be readable immediately because of the nature of S3. Under the hood, it's storing data in multiple nodes. So you might query a node that had the old data, the old version of a file. So now that's changed. So now when you do a write or an update to an existing file, that will be strongly consistent for a read immediately. So that delay is now gone, which is significant for a lot of use cases around data and data lakes and things like that, where you just don't want your data to be stored in an inconsistent state. The final one I'll talk about is KMS or encryption. So obviously, you know, we encrypt everywhere, encrypt everything. That's the way to do things. But if you were encrypting your objects in a bucket and you had many objects, and you were doing a lot of reading and writing of those objects, with KMS encryption, that could be quite expensive, because each time you're using KMS to encrypt an object, you're being charged for that. So the new feature is I think called S3 keys, or S3 encryption keys, I think they're called. So what that gives you, S3 bucket keys they're called. So what that gives you is a sort of an intermediate key that sits between KMS and S3 and the data encryption key. So it essentially allows S3 to act independently of KMS and do those encryption operations at a lower rate, a lower price basically. So instead of invoking KMS to encrypt and decrypt every object, it uses this intermediate key, which is free to use instead. So that's a handy thing. That should make encrypted operations and objects in your S3 buckets substantially cheaper if you choose to take that up. So that's all there is at the moment. There'll be more, of course, but thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk soon.
AC3. Find clarity in the cloud.